My name is Hugh Ramos, and this is the first episode of a series of videos I would like to do where I can talk about true crime. Here's the thing. So I'm just going to eat various types of food. Where's my drink? Various types of food. So today we'll be talking about the Axeman of New Orleans. I've got my halo top, and I've got my dry tea. So let's crack it in. What does that even mean? Whatever. Anyway, editing Matthew, put allegedly at the very beginning of this because I don't want to get sued. This is all going to be to the best of my knowledge and all in my opinion. These are going to be just theories and just things that I read on the internet. None of this has actually been fact, so please disregard everything as a fact and take it as my own opinion. Thank you. The Axeman of New Orleans was a notorious serial killer running from May 23rd, 1918 to October 27th, 1919. Basically, what he would do is he would take a chisel, go into people's backyards, chisel out the back panel of their back door, and then proceed to break into their house and use their axe to beat them in the head while they're sleeping. Here's the kicker. He only primarily attacked Italian grocers and women. So basically, if you were an Italian woman who owned a grocery store in New Orleans, you were kind of just like, I don't know what to do. Out of all of his attacks, nothing was ever stolen. So the police were just like, he must just be like killing for fun. They would always be like, everything would be thrown everywhere. There'd be papers and everything would just be thrown all over the place, but nothing was ever stolen. So they didn't really know what to do with this information. The first attack was on May 16th of 1912. Here's where things kind of get a little suspicious because nobody really knows when the Axeman started, and here's a couple of things. So the Axeman likes Italian women grocers, fact one. But on May 16th of 1912, an Italian couple by the name Sciambra, they were Italian grocers and they were attacked. They were shot by an intruder in the lower 9th ward of New Orleans, which Mrs. Sciambra survived. At the time, the police really thought this guy named Momfrey did it, and he was the only suspect in that case. But it doesn't really fit like the Axeman's kind of like way of doing it. They were shot, and the Axeman obviously used an axe. He also sometimes used a straight razor to slit their throat, but that's a different story. But this case was also never proven to be the actual result of the Axeman, but he was never caught, so can they really say anything? You know what I mean? It could have all been different people. It could have been any number of people, really, that did these crimes. Copycats. There's just a whole bunch of, options, we really don't know anything. We don't know anything. On May 23rd of 1918, Joseph and Catherine Maggio were attacked in their home while they were sleeping. They were also Italian grocers, and this is, where the whole thing about the straight razor comes in. He slit their throats with a straight razor, then beat them upside the head with an axe. Here's what I don't get. He must have never used the sharp edge of the axe. He must have always used the blunt end, because I would feel like if you had an axe, it's meant to cut down trees, and just one swing of that thing in at a person who's not moving would be but apparently they would always just have skull fractures and stuff. So apparently this person probably wasn't very strong, or just very horrible at his job. I'm getting into okay. It was suspected that the killer on this was trying to conceal the original way of killing them, which was slitting their throats by beating upside the head with an axe. And they also found a pair of dirty, bloody clothes that belonged to the killer, but which made them think that he had changed into regular clothes to leave so he wouldn't look like he had just killed some people. And this is also what got me, was that they thought he was a heavy-set man, a heavy-set black man. Hold on, we're getting into that. Hold on. I'm getting ahead of myself. So basically, Joseph and Catherine were discovered by Jake and Andrew Maggio, who were Joseph's brothers. Catherine was nearly decapitated. She was gone from the start. But Joseph was survived, and he was but he died shortly after. I think he died 2 days after. Here's the thing. Ready? There was one source that I found that outside the building, there was in chalk, Mrs. Joseph Maggio will sit up tonight. Just write Mrs. Tony. Only one source said that out of the few that I looked at, so I don't really know if that's true. Here's the thing. The police kind of dropped the ball on this one. A complete search was never done of the house, but a neighbor actually found a straight razor used to slit their throat in his yard. And the straight razor was actually Andrew Maggio's, Joseph's brother. And Joseph's brother, he owned his own barbershop. And Esteban Torres, an employee of Andrew Maggio's, was yeah, that's Andrew's razor. He had taken it from the shop to get a nick out of the blade. So that's suspicious, right? Why would you the razor would not be in Joseph's house. So it's just Andrew's also suspicious because he lived in an adjoining apartment, and he said that he didn't hear anything because he was drunk. In his intoxicated state, he was unable to really hear anything and wasn't able to actually hear anything until 2 hours after. So, suspicious. Also, where was Jake? Where does Jake live? I was never able to figure that out. Was Jake living with them? Did Jake, was Jake just couch surfing at these people's house? Because where was he? Why was he with Andrew? And it's also if he and Andrew both found them, where was Jake? Jake could have corroborated anything Andrew said. Maybe it was the both of them. Who knows? Also, the police are very suspicious of Andrew because he said he didn't hear anything, because there was forced entry into the house, which means that it would have been a loud banging and stuff like that. So he would have heard. But also Joseph and Catherine were sleeping and they didn't wake up. So what's the truth? Andrew was taken by the police and investigated, but he was released because there was no evidence. And besides like the straight razor, but like, I guess that's evidence. Why did they... Anyway, Andrew blamed it on this random man that was seen lurking around the neighborhood days prior to the attack. Andrew's a suspicious being, and so was Jake. Like, what's the truth? I said it here first. You know, on June 17th of 1918, Louis Bessemer and his mistress Harriet Lowe were attacked while they were sleeping. It said in the back of their grocery store, but also in their apartment. I know from like personal experience, I never owned a grocery in 1918 in New Orleans, but I know that like they sometimes lived above their grocery stores. So maybe like the apartment was just in the back of the grocery store, and this is why it was kind of conflicting, because they were sleeping in their apartment. Bessemer, who's the man, Bessemer was attacked above his right temple, and Lowe, who's the woman, was attacked by right above her left ear, and he was in his right temple. That's right. So she was kind of like out of it after. They both survived. She was a bit out of it after this whole situation, and she was never like coherent for very long after the attack. Also, like half her face was like partially paralyzed. I'm assuming it's like one of the halves and not like this half. John Zanko actually discovered them. He was doing a routine delivery for the grocery store. He was a bakery delivery. He had done a routine delivery and he had found them. I don't really know why he was in their apartment. Maybe because he like, I don't know, maybe like they needed to sign something. Maybe just wanted to know what, I don't know why Zanko was in their bedroom. Why would you go there if you're just dropping stuff off? Maybe the signature was needed. I'm not sure. In the bathroom of the apartment, the police found the murder weapon, which is Bessemer's own axe, which then became kind of like a staple of the crime, was that people were getting attacked by their own items, which was like axes. The straight razor. Oh. Okay, that makes more sense. So the axemen used like people's own axes to hurt them. So maybe because Andrew lived in an adjoining apartment, he had actually broken into that apartment, stole the straight razor, and then stole Joseph Maggio's axe, and then did it that way. In that case, Jake's looking even more suspicious because he was there. You know what I mean? A Louis Ubicoin was arrested as a result. He was a 41-year-old man, and basically there was nothing really against him. He just worked for Bessemer and Lowe in the grocery store. It was Bessemer's grocery store. Lowe was just kind of like hanging out, straight chilling. The police had on Ubicoin, so I'm saying that right, Ubicon, whatever, was that his statement of what his whereabouts were conflicting, and so they were just like, it was you, man, like you being suspicious, where were you? And he was just like, I was here, but really I was there. And then it was just kind of like, we gotta take you in, bud. So they did. Low, so Ubicon, it doesn't matter. He was an African American, and then Lowe kind of like woke up out of her like paralyzed state or whatever, and was just like, the man that attacked us was half white, half black. But the police kind of like threw this out on the basis that she was just like, she wasn't in a right mind to be saying anything, so they kind of just threw this out. But then Bessemer became a suspicious being, and he was just like, the police had found notes in like a trunk in his house. I think it was the police had found notes in his trunk in his house about written in Russian, Yiddish, and German. So then they were like, maybe this dude's like a German spy. And then Harriet Lowe was just like not doing her part, and she actually was like, yeah, he's a German spy. And the police like arrested Bessemer because of this, which was kind of suspicious because it's just like, you didn't attack Weebicoin about, you didn't do anything with him because of her disillusioned state. And then now you're just gonna be like, yeah, it was this dude, it was a German spy. But like, this lady's just like, was just hit in the head with an axe a couple days ago. So who really knows what her problem was? Because of Bessemer's arrest and the inappropriate way that he was arrested, the two cops that arrested him were actually demoted, and he was released 2 days later. Lowe became a suspicious being because she kept talking bad about Bessemer. She kept talking bad about the chief of police into the newspaper, and she was also Bessemer's mistress, which was kind of like, you didn't do that back then. You didn't tell newspapers you were a mistress to some guy that you're saying was trying to kill you. But also, like, he himself had like an injury in his head, so it's like, why would he attack himself? Could you attack yourself in that manner? So because the Times-Picayune released that she was someone's mistress, that she was in fact a mistress, she stopped cooperating with the police because she thought that Chief Mooney, who was the chief of police for the New Orleans at that time, she thought that he was a snitch and he was telling everybody that she was a mistress. And so she was kind of like, I'm not working with y'all anymore. I finished my ice cream. She was like, I'm not working with y'all anymore because y'all are like ruining my life, trying to like say that I'm somebody's mistress. And then at some point, Bessemer's real wife came back from Cincinnati, and like that kind of blew up for a little bit, but it was just kind of like, it was glossed over. It doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things anyway. Frank Mooney was actually quoted as saying that the murderer was a murderous degenerate who gloats over blood. Lowe had actually experienced a facial surgery designed to fix her partially paralyzed face. It was a botched surgery, and she actually died 2 days later as a result. And it was actually as she was dying that she confessed that Bessemer was the one who attacked her. And she died on August 5th of 1918. Bessemer was arrested for 9 months, and he was actually acquitted in May of 1919 after a 10-minute jury deliberation because there was nothing against him besides Lowe's word. And she was kind of just like, I was hit in the face. She was in no state of mind to be like accusing anybody to do anything. What was suspicious was that on the same day, August 5th, when Lowe died, on the same day that Lowe died, a woman named Anna Schneider, who was a 28-year-old pregnant lady, she was 8 months pregnant at the time, she was also attacked. She was bashed in the face repeatedly while she was attacked, and her husband Ed actually found her because he was working late. I assumed he worked overnights someplace doing something, and he had found her and he had called the police. Anna actually survived and gave birth 2 days later to their baby girl, which is kind of just like, ha ha ha, tried to kill me, but I ended up surviving and I delivered my baby. So, but Anna Schneider could not remember anything of the attack, which she just couldn't, because she was hit in the head. You know what I mean? This was kind of weird only because there was no sign of forced entry, which was usually how the Axeman did his thing. And also a lamp on a nearby table was decided to be the murder weapon, which doesn't really fit the Axeman's kind of thingamabob. It's not his thing. There was a Mr. James Gleason who was known to be an ex-convict around town, and he was going to be questioned. But as the police were going to question him, he actually ran away, and so they arrested him and accused him of trying to kill Anna Schneider. And he was released because there was nothing connecting him to the crime. And when he was interviewed, he actually said, I ran because I'm just used to running out of habit from the police, so that's what I did. And so can you really blame him? You know what I mean? Anyway, police kind of sketch people back then. They didn't know what they were doing. They knew what they were doing. They were just doing it wrong. You know what I mean? And at this point, when Anna Schneider died, was when they were kind of connecting all the dots together about this maybe the same dude doing it. On August 10th of 1918, Joseph Romano was actually attacked. He was living with his two nieces, Pauline and Mary Bruno. They had actually found him. He was elderly and he was living with them. I'm assuming he didn't have any kids. It's not important. The attacker of James Romano was actually fleeing the scene as the nieces were strolling up, and they were just it was a heavy-set, dark-skinned man wearing a dark suit and a slouched hat. And that was the only description that police were ever given about this man. And I feel they could have taken the clothes from the first murder that he left and then compared it to see if they were the same person, because if not, maybe their accusation was wrong or it's two different people. The police weren't doing their job at this time. Joseph Romano actually died 2 days later as a result of his injuries, and this was kind of where the police started connecting all the dots of the routine of the Axeman doing all these killings. Because with Anna Schneider, it was more of they were understanding that this may be connected, but with Joseph Romano, there was definitely an ABC to this type of thing, a routine, if you will, to this type of crime, and so they were then assuming that it was the same person. The crime kind of caused a lot of trouble publicly. People started losing their absolute minds over this. John D'Antonio, who was an ex-Italian detective, he actually connected these crimes to the string in 1911, 1912, which was the first crime that I had mentioned, and he was the one connecting all the dots to those strings of murders. At this point, the police were just getting all kinds of calls about axe-wielding men lurking around neighborhoods, axes left in backyards, straight razors in backyards, chisels left in backyards, panels of doors missing, and everyone was just losing their minds. It's just kind of they want to hop on that train. And D'Antonio was to say that this could actually be someone with split personality disorder, and this could be a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde situation where someone lives a peaceful day in the daytime, but then for whatever reason just becomes a lunatic at nighttime and just wants to kill people with axes. I don't know anybody like that, but they probably exist somewhere. On March 10th of 1919, Joseph Cortimiglia lived with his wife Rosie and their daughter Mary when they were attacked in their sleep. Rosie, who was the wife, was found, and she was found holding her dead daughter. She had actually claimed that she had been awoken by Charles wrestling with an axe-wielding man, and then once her husband was thrown to the floor, he then attacked them with one single swing that killed her baby and had hurt her as well. Orlando Giordano. I found two different things. Somebody said it was Lorlando. It was Orlando but with an L in front, but then it was also spelled Orlando, so I'm just going to be calling him Orlando because that was the first time I saw his name spelled, and that's just the least confusing for me as a person. Orlando actually heard the screaming and went there and found them and then called the police. The two adults, so Charles and Rosie, were found alive. They did have skull fractures, but for the most part they were okay. A panel of their back door had been chiseled out like how everyone else had described this. The axe was left bloody and in the backyard. So it's kind of just the Axeman doing his thing at this point in time. So Mr. Orlando had a son named Frank who was 17 years old at the time. Somebody said that he was 17, then another place said that he was 18, so I'm assuming that he had a birthday at some point in time over the situation and they just rolled with it. They were actually blamed for the crime by Police Chief Peter Leeson and Sheriff Louis Marrero. They're kind of suspicious. They kind of like assumed that because the Giordano's and the Cortamiglias were both Italian grocers and they had a legal dispute, that this was kind of like business related as far as like the crime goes. And so basically what had happened was that Leeson and Marrero was in the hospital with Rosie as she was like recovering, and they were just like harassing her about it was the Orlandos, like, we're not leaving until you say it was the Giordano's. I said the Orlandos previously, it's the Giordano's. We're not leaving until you say it's them. Rosie at first did not agree that this was like what was going to happen. She was like, I don't really think so. She was arrested for being a material witness to the crime, which is kind of like she's also a victim. I don't know what they were thinking, but she was arrested, and she was only released from jail after she agreed that it was the Giordano's who had attacked her husband, and her baby. But here's kind of like the kicker. You ready? So Orlando was old. He was 69 years old, and he could not like physically do anything that was involved in the crime. He was kind of feeble. He was a feeble old man. He was 69 years old. Give him a break. You know what I mean? And he could not like do everything that they thought he could do. And also Frank was over 6 foot tall, more than 200 pounds, and he could not fit through the panel that was in the back door. So it was just kind of like suspicious about like, why do you think Charles had actually publicly disagreed with his wife. He had never thought that they were a part of it. But he was just kind of like pushed to the side by Leeson and Marrero. Frank and Orlando were arrested and charged anyway. Frank was actually sentenced to hang, and Orlando was sentenced to life in prison, which is kind of like strange because I feel like they would have hung the older person and not the younger person, but whatever. So Charles had actually divorced his wife Rosie. I don't know if it was over this dispute or just like the struggle of losing their daughter together, because that does happen when couples lose a child. They do sometimes split off. So I don't really know why he divorced his wife. 9 months later, Rosie had walked into a newspaper place, a newspaper building, wherever they write the newspapers at. She had actually said that St. Joseph came to her in a dream, and he had told her to confess her lies. So she was like, I lied. They didn't do anything. And Leeson and Marrero, just being the wonderful police people they are, they actually were just like, Rosie, if you don't go with the original statement, we're going to charge you with perjury. And she was just like, I can't do this anymore. I'm old. I was attacked and I'm sleepy, and I just need to calm down, and I need to like right my wrongs. I just can't do this anymore. So she actually confessed, and she was just like, I was lying. It was a lie. The Italians were kind of like, this was like Leeson and Marrero's kind of thinking was the Italians were deemed as less than white people in this time in New Orleans, and they also were noted as being very suspicious and untrusting, whatever. They didn't like authority. They felt like authority they just couldn't trust authority with their like judicial system. So they would take matters into their own hands, hence like the mafia and stuff like that. But the same man, John D'Antonio actually dismissed any sort of mafia involvement only because in his research, mafia people didn't leave survivors, which is kind of like very true. He had actually agreed with Frank Mooney about it being a dual personality situation. On March 13th of 1919, a letter was actually published in the newspaper claiming to be from the Axeman, and he started the letter with "From Hell." And I'm gonna read you like this little excerpt from his letter. Are you ready? Esteemed mortal of New Orleans, the Axeman. They have never caught me, and they never will. I am not a human being, but a spirit. I can't do that. Okay. Anyway, I am what you Orleanians and your foolish police call the Axeman. Undoubtedly, you Orleanians think of me as a horrible murderer, which I am, but I could be much worse. I have been, am, and will be the worst spirit that ever existed, either in fact or realm of fancy. And the letter basically later on was just like, I'm going to attack somebody 15 minutes after midnight on March 19th of 1919, unless the household is playing jazz, in which case I'll spare everyone in that house. And so that night, jazz roared across the city. Every bar, pub, club, place that there was live music, they were packed full of people blaring jazz music. Jazz was coming out of every house. It was just crazy. Jazz was just like blaring over everything. They were just like, we're not getting killed today. Sorry, bud. No one actually died too. So I have heard this theory that some people have speculated that maybe he was going out of town and wanted to account for something. So he had known that everyone was going to play jazz. So he threatened that and then was able to leave town and then come back and then continue the murders. But that has never been proven, obviously, because he was never caught. On August 10th of 1919, 1919, Steve Boca was a grocer who was attacked while sleeping in his bedroom. Boca was like a tough cookie because he had been hit in the head with an axe, and he had actually ran out to the street to look for his attacker. But then at that point, he realized his skull was cracked, and he was just gone after that point, I guess. Boca had ran to his neighbor, Frank Janusa, and then it was at Frank Janusa's house that he actually just collapsed from the attack, and he went rushed to the hospital. It was the same kind of like song and dance of like the back panel being removed, and also Boca did not remember anything after he woke up from in the hospital. On September 2nd of 1919, William Carson was a druggist, and he had actually claimed to have escaped an attack from the Axeman because he shot several shots at an intruder who was trying to enter his house. And it was the same thing about like an axe was found at the scene, and also a panel was chiseled out of his back door. So that could have been true, actually. This next one is kind of just like a story that would give me hope as a human being in humanity, because on September 3rd, 1919, a day later after the Axeman failed his attack on that other man, on William Carson, a Sarah Lohman was actually attacked. She was 19 years old, living in an apartment by herself, and her neighbors actually went to check on her, and that's where they found her in her bed, having been attacked. And that's just kind of like, wow, my neighbors would never check on me. They don't even know that I exist. Who are my neighbors? Do they know who I am? Talk to your neighbors, kids. The axe was actually found in the front of the building instead of the back. Lohman actually survived, but she couldn't remember anything after she recovered. This Axeman really isn't good at his job because he's leaving all these kinds of survivors, you know what I mean? On October 27th of 1919, Mike Pepitone was reportedly the last victim of the Axeman, and he was actually killed. Mike Pepitone was attacked in his sleep, and he was found by his wife, Mrs. Pepitone. Here's what gets me. Mrs. Pepitone awoke from a noise and rushed to her husband's bedroom. Why do they have different bedrooms? My grandparents have different bedrooms, but Stop it, Matthew. Mrs. Pepitone was actually left as a mother of 6. She claimed to have seen the attacker, and he was a large man fleeing the scene. But other than that, she couldn't report any sort of description about him whatsoever. There was also a case where somebody in Los Angeles, maybe I'll get to that later. Maybe I wrote it down. Maybe I'm smart. You know what I mean? We'll see. That was the last reported killings of the Axeman, but there are just kind of other ones. So like in December of 1919, a Joseph Sparrow was attacked in a different part of Louisiana, and he was reported. It was kind of like very similar to the Axeman's killing, so they thought that maybe he was also in it. His daughter Alexandria was actually killed as well, with Joseph Sparrow, unfortunately. In January of 1921, Giovanni Orlando was actually killed in a different part of Louisiana as well. And in April 1921, Frank Scalise was killed as a result of a attack, obviously. These were all suspected to be Axeman killings because it was kind of like the same song and dance of Italian grocers and axes and back panels. But like there was no proof to say that they were the same person and not a copycat, because they were all in 3 different areas. Because the 3 of them were kind of far away from New Orleans, and then they were all kind of far away from each other too. So it was just deemed that it may have been copycats. So Joseph Mumphrey's first. Colin Wilson is a crime writer, crime investigator. I don't remember what he does for a living, but Colin Wilson had described Joseph Mumphrey as being the first suspect. I believe he was not alive during the time. He is just looking at it in retrospect. In December of 1920, Joseph Mumphrey was actually shot dead by Mrs. Pepitone because she's just flawless. I forgot to have mentioned that he was actually shot in Los Angeles. Colin Wilson believed that this person was who killed her husband, and then undoubtedly the Axeman who had killed the other people. But Michael Newton, who's like a smart cookie, because whoever this Colin Wilson person is didn't do his research. Michael Newton actually did his own digging and didn't find a Joseph Mumphrey being killed in Los Angeles or New Orleans at that time. So that was kind of like thrown out of the window completely. He also Mike Newton also found that Miss Pepitone was never tried, arrested, or convicted for any such crime as killing somebody, and she had never actually been to California to have killed this man in Los Angeles. So like they were just grasping at straws, I think, in my opinion. Allegedly, only like 4 people are gonna watch this. What am I even saying? So the last name Mumphrey was actually not uncommon in New Orleans at the time, according to Michael Newton. But there was kind of like a little bit of arguing and debate over the spelling of the last name. So it could have been Mumphrey, Momfre, Mumphrey, Mumfre, Monfrey. There's just a whole bunch of different ways that they can spell it. The local records at the time were not extensive enough to support this, but there was suspected that there was a Joseph Mumphrey, Mumfre, who was involved in criminal activity in New Orleans at the time, but this could not have been proven based on the evidence of local records at the time. They were not extensive enough. The second suspect is Frank Doc Mumphrey. This Mumphrey person definitely probably did it because there's just a bunch of those kind of like thrown out there. Richard Warner, he's a scholar, and he actually said that Frank Doc Mumphrey was the chief suspect for this crime. Warner had actually said that Frank had actually used a Leon Joseph Munfrey and then Leon Joseph Manfrey as aliases. So there was kind of like a theory that the Axeman was a white male in his mid-30s who was going in and breaking into people's houses with a railroad shoe pin. This identified to police that he was an expert burglar. Italians were kind of like hated on at the time because they were just like owning too many shops, and they were basically like, they would work on farms and then they would like save up some money and then open their own grocery store, leaving the white people who had farms to be like, we are employing these Italians and not even staying long enough to like make it worth our while, because they were saving enough money to like go and open a candy shop or like grocery store or like a whatever. And then they were on their own at that point. So then they thought maybe this was like a hate crime against Italian immigrants and Italian Americans. Believers of this theory kind of believed the idea that the Cortamiglias were the last victims of the Axeman, and that Mike Pepitone was a result of a long-standing vendetta, kind of like relating back to the mafia issue of the time. Some believe that this was like a sex-related crime because primarily women were killed and men tend to have only been killed if they were seen as obstacles of the crime, really. The men were primarily sleeping and their wives were killed while they were sleeping next to them. I feel like I would wake up, but maybe some people are just heavier sleepers than me. I have no idea. There is like a wild cockeyed theory that this was a marketing ploy from the jazz music industry to promote jazz music, or that the Axeman was a lover of jazz, trying to get people to love jazz too, and this is just some cockeyed theory. Like, I don't believe. Like, I'm gonna kill a whole bunch of people who like jazz music. Yeah, it's like, I like music, but like, I'm not gonna kill somebody who doesn't like it. You know what I mean? It's just cockeyed. So, my name is Matthew Raymond, so thank you for watching. It's kind of like all over the place, you know what I mean? I'm going to hope that I can like get this kind of like figured out a little bit. I'm gonna get a ring light and look professional. I'm gonna get an angle to where you can actually see what I'm eating. And I wanted to take the time to recommend this book that I have. It's called The Shack. My friend Anna Lee actually recommended it to me. It is about Jesus, so if you're not into that, like, don't read it, but like, I just wanted to share it because it is really good. If you do like Jesus, I'm on chapter 12. It is really insightful. It's very philosophical in a way, and I do appreciate it. So thanks, Anna Lee. What do you do with Matthew? The point of these videos is that it's going to be called Cooking Up Crime, and I will have food that I will be eating while I talk about my various crime nonsense.